All right, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It is the end of the year, so you know what that means? We take a break from talking about news and public policy and instead spend a week talking about movies and pop culture with our best reoccurring guest of all time, award-winning film critic Christian Toto. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. The end of woke Hollywood, possibly, the decline in celebrity irrelevancy, AI in movie making, and we'll talk about some of the best and worst movies of 2024 on this episode of the In the Tank podcast.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that.
That is right, President Trump, and welcome to the show. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and I've got a full crew today. This is a special episode, but not so special of a guest. We got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I've been demoted to guest. Goodness, I thought I was a regular panelist. Oh, well, I'll take it, though. It's a great show. Glad to be with you. Merry Christmas, everyone, and Happy New Year very soon.
That is right. Also joining us, we have Linnea Lueken, who is a I don't have your title, research fellow for the Center of something or another here at the Heartland Institute. Linnea, how are you today?
Thank you. Great. And it is, I think, possibly the longest title at Heartland.
That's why I don't remember it, VP of Heartland with Jim, that's easy. No problem.
Right.
Thank you for being on with us, Linnea. But what everyone's here for, fifth time in a row, longest running tradition of the In the Tank podcast by far. We have Christian Toto, like I said, award-winning film critic, journalist, founder of Hollywood and Toto. He's the author of the recently released book, Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul, and hosts the Hollywood and Toto podcast on the Radio America Network. Christian Toto, thank you for being on with us.
I'm so happy to be here, and I got this mug from you for being the fifth time guest, so I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
That's right. Yes. Everyone that's, watching the past episodes with you understood that reference. So yes, fifth time in a row, you get a mug. 10 times in a row, you get Jim's chair.
Two mugs.
Two mugs. So we've got a lot to talk about. Like I said, every year, Jim and I, just especially around the holidays, we just want to not think about the politics and what Donald Trump's doing and what the media has to say about whatever, and instead just spend some time talking about one of our favorite pastimes, which is talking about movies and just the Hollywood industry, the movie making industry in general. So like I said, fifth time in a row joining us, Christian Toto, to talk about all of that, give us some insight into some of these topics. And as you see there on the sidebar, we've got a number of issues that we're going to be talking about with Christian here. But the first thing that I want to mention is I went back in preparation for this podcast and watched I sampled the previous 4 episodes that you were on. And many of them talked about this idea of wokeness in the movies. Going back to the 2021 episode was titled No More Woke, Hollywood and China Decoupling. The second 2022, we had a segment or a part of the description of the episode that says, did Tom Cruise put a stake in the heart of woke Hollywood? And then last year was talking about the death of franchises and how basically wokeness took down Indiana Jones and Star Wars and Marvel and all of this stuff. So 3 years in a row, we're talking about the potential decline of wokeness in movies. So how is this just grasping at straws? Are we perpetually looking for the end of wokeness? Is this the first year that we really saw wokeness on the decline? What's your take on all of this?
I mean, I think part of it was wishful thinking on behalf of myself and others who just want stories and want to be entertained and don't want to be lectured and want Hollywood screenwriters to just basically be creative and be their true artistic selves. And I think woke has really clamped that down, which is why I've been fighting against it so aggressively. But I think we can point to real progress this year. And if you don't believe me, you can read the New York Times. The New York Times had an essay, gosh, just a few days ago, that really called this, in a sense, the end or the closing of this chapter in pop culture history. And it's when you read the piece, it's almost like I wrote it, or the Critical Drinker wrote it, or Chris Gore from Film Threat. People have been really railing against this woke takeover. It's shocking that it came from the New York Times, but good on them for at least recognizing what's going on. And it talks about how this is a period of time that will not age well, and it's already not aging well, which I thought was a fascinating perspective. They even mentioned James Bond movies, which are very problematic to certain groups, and saying how they're more fun and they're more lively and they're more timeless than the films we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years. I was flabbergasted by it, but I'm glad to see it.
Okay, so I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine where he asked me to define wokeness in movies. And I kind of struggled on this because, like, I think even some of us on this podcast might kind of differ in our opinions of it. I'm a little less likely to call something woke. I think some people are a little bit more liberal with throwing around that terminology. So, okay, great. Because I really do feel like it's overused. So can you do you have like a pocket definition of what you consider like woke when it comes to movie making?
I don't have one prepackaged, but I could tell you what I think it is and what I refer to it as. It's storytelling that is, that has parameters on it where you can't go in any direction you please. That's part of what woke means, where you can't offend certain groups. You can't talk about certain topics. Other topics you have to kind of bring to the forward. But I also think it's a storytelling style that factors identity politics over art. And also, I think when you see a movie or a TV show and there's a little baked-in lecture along the way, I think that's really what woke is, because it really just basically takes you out of the experience. When I go to the movies, I bring a little notepad. I'm a critic. I write notes, and I kind of make little mentions and try to think of things that I want to record when I share the actual review. But I'm happiest when I just put my pad and pen down and just get lost in the experience. I let the story take over. And I think when you're watching a woke movie or a woke sequence, it stops things cold. You're like, oh, that's a character giving a speech. That's a plot twist that is meant to convey something very specific and very obvious. So I think if you combine all those different little vignettes, I think that's what woke is.
Yeah. So when I was like kind of struggling to define it, I was like, it's like that old. I don't even. This reference is probably older than me, but it's like it's like pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And that's kind of what I was thinking about with like woke in movies.
We're gonna have porn on here today. I had no idea.
So well, not yet, but
it's exciting.
We'll see what's in your best and worst movies of the year list. But like Lady Ghostbusters, as I like to call it, the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot. The selling point of that movie in the like promotion for it, in the interviews, all of it, right? The promotion for that movie was, hey, look, there's women in this role. That was the movie.
Yeah.
Like that to me was like putting, like what you said, putting identity politics at the front lines of like what your movie is trying to do. There's other things that I don't consider it. Everyone was trying to say that the latest like James Bond movie was woke because it had a lady in it. I don't think that's woke.
No.
So yeah, it's a little hard for me to define, but when there's like direct references, I've used this example before, when there's direct references to like Donald Trump, it's like I feel like that's probably a sign that this is a woke movie.
Can I give a quick example? The name of the movie is escaping me. It's a horror film from maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's about these two children. They're like best buddies. One of them gets kidnapped and the other one tries to rescue his friend. And again, it doesn't matter what the title is, but in the middle of that movie, the bad guy, the kidnapper, drives away briefly in his car, and you see the bumper sticker on his car, and it was something like Trump 2016. It was some sort of Trump bumper sticker, and it was such an obvious thing that, okay, he's not bad enough because he kidnaps children and probably going to kill them. He's also a Trump fan. And it just took you right out of the moment. And that's, I think, what a crystal clear woke little flourish is, because it's just unnecessary. It doesn't add to the story, and it takes you out of the experience. I think that's maybe my best example in a way.
That takes you out of the experience. It breaks your immersion. I think that's like the worst quality of these things.
Yep.
When there was one of the Jurassic World movies, I think it was like the second one. One of the bad guys referenced one of the protagonists as being a nasty woman, and I immediately knew that was what they were referencing Trump. And I just couldn't get. Like all of a sudden, I could see the cameras, and I could see the boom mic, and I could see the lighting. You know, it was just like, this is a movie now. It's not like a something that I'm experiencing anymore. Linnea, what do you think? I mean, are you one that kind of sees wokeness in everything, or are you a little bit more I don't know, like specific when you're writing stuff off as being woke?
Well, I don't know. I agree that the term woke is used way too liberally. People are very fast and loose with it. Like anything that even hints a little bit of something not center right or to the right of that is immediately labeled woke. And I think it's okay for like liberal movies to exist and they can still be good. I think a woke movie is always going to be bad because it's so blunt and careless about how it uses that kind of like little propaganda bits. Like in the most recent Doctor Strange movie that came out a couple of years ago, the Miss Marvel character, I think it's Miss Marvel. I don't even follow the comics anymore. It's just gotten so bad for a big nerd like me. She has like a trans flag pin on her little like jacket. And it's as if they framed every single shot to make sure that that pin is in the shot, even if it like kind of didn't make sense or like it wasn't artistically pleasing for the way that they were framing the shot. And I thought, okay, I'm out of it now. Like I not that the movie was good anyway, because it wasn't, but like, even if it was just like a fun popcorn flick, I can't anymore because I know what you're trying to say with this. Like, it's not cute. It's not subtle. It's just like, oh yeah, and we have to check this box because corporate wants it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, Jim, I mean, you and I, when we're having lunch, sometimes we're talking about this stuff. You've mentioned this idea that, especially for like some of the bigger budget movies in the industry, there's almost like it almost tends to lag culture because these scripts are written and then they have to go through the whole process that takes a long time, and then the actual production time takes sometimes years, and then by the time the movie comes out, it's telling the story from a years ago context, and you've referenced that as like, it seems like everyone is done with this like this woke stuff, but these movies are still coming out because they've just been in the pipeline. Yeah. Is that pipeline over? Do you think that we're kind of at the end of it, and everything now from this point forward is going to be a little bit more recognizing that people are sick of it, as evidenced by that New York Times article that Christian mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think Christian can tie a nice bow on this, but I was thinking that this all really got ramped up with Trump's election in 2016. Frankly, just his candidacy in 2016. If you remember the marketing when they would go on talk shows, the cast of Lady Ghostbusters, they basically came out and stated that this movie is to support Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump, and it was going to be kind of the Hollywood comedy cherry on top of Breaking of the Glass Ceiling to mix all sorts of metaphors and foods into a huge mess. But the way I kind of see it now is that it started with the election of Trump, because the election of Donald Trump broke the minds of people in Hollywood. They broke the brains of our so-called mainstream media. They all went absolutely insane when he was elected president. And now here it is. Donald Trump is elected again in November after an interregnum of 4 years. And it seems that the woke era in Hollywood will end with his re-election. I think that you'll be able to put bookends on this, Christian, when people look at Hollywood history, and they'll see the woke era of Hollywood began with the election of Trump the first time and ended with his election the second time. And it's you see it in, just putting that aside, in my mind, the woke Hollywood is is things like gender and race swapping just for the sake of DEI, or because, especially men have had it too good in Hollywood. They get to be the heroes all the time. Now it's time for a hero, which is what the marketing was for Captain Marvel. It said, her, and then, we come in, so it's a hero. See, not a hero. Christian, there's a new animated movie called The War of the Rohirrim, which is based on basically just a little bit of notes in an appendix from Lord of the Rings, from that whole universe. And you would think that it was going to be a movie about the person that's mentioned by name in that appendix, but it's not. It's they invent a whole warrior princess to be the real hero and star of that movie, who has she doesn't even have a name in the appendix, but they give her one, Hera, in the movie, and they make her the focus of it instead of Hammerhand, who was the one who was actually referenced in that Tolkien appendix. So it's like from Ghostbusters, like, everyone will love it if we just made a point to change all of the original cast to women. See, that's really innovative and great, and it's responding to the Me Too movement. And of course, what we found was that audiences don't respond to that. Marvel has been holding in the can, Christian, I think for 2 years now, Ironheart, who is supposed to be the replacement for Tony Stark's Iron Man. It's done already. They will not bring it out, and what I think you're going to see, and this goes to what, and I want you to answer it as well, but goes to what Donnie just said, that, it takes a while, 8 months, probably at the very shortest, to a couple of years for Hollywood's scriptwriters and producers and directors to react and get in step with the audience, because these studios are losing hundreds of millions of dollars. They have to get back in step with the public. The election in November said very clearly where the public is on this stuff. It didn't just say something politically, it said something culturally. So it may take a little while for Hollywood to catch up, but they have very little runway left, as it were, because they're running out of money.
Gosh, there's a lot to respond to. I want to just applaud your kind of book ending this chapter in pop culture history with the Trump elections. I think you're right. I mean, I think time will tell. We could be, the woke could have a magical comeback, but I think that's a really astute observation. And it's so interesting that they tried it failed, and then electorally they also failed as well. One of the things that the New York Times article mentioned, which made me so happy to see, was there's a small section, but an acknowledgement that a lot of film critics really praised these woke films in a way that wasn't really appropriate, and basically saying the messaging was right, the casting was right, the identity politics were on target, and that's why they got better reviews than maybe they should have. So that was a really interesting observation. Couldn't agree more. And I wrote about this in 2016, I believe. Richard Roper, one of our more notable critics, he teamed up with Roger Ebert back in the day. He said that his fellow critics graded Ghostbusters, the 2016 edition, on a curve. And I think he was absolutely right. I think he was being honest, and I don't think enough people talked about that. But that's also part of it, where the whole ecosystem in Hollywood, the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, The Wrap, and film critics in general we're all supporting this movement. We're all promoting it. We're attacking films that spoke out against it. And I think that really helped prolong it. But now in the culture, I think we're just sick of it. And I think it's, when a New York Times can publish an article like that, it means something. And I'm glad to see it. It's about time. And at the end of the day, there were many great progressive films. Dead Man Walking. I saw a horror movie probably 2 years ago called Flesh, about a woman who's single and she meets a great guy. Then he turns out to be a real monster. I thought it was very feminist and very good. It didn't lecture, it entertained, it had a message to share, it had something you wanted to think about, but didn't go in this woke direction. So I'd recommend that to anybody. So I think, you can have great progressive films, you can have great messages and stories. You don't have to agree with them, but it's in the storytelling where the woke so often gets in the way.
Yeah, there's it's kind of funny because it doesn't seem like what we're talking about is isolated just to the film industry. A few months ago, no, maybe not months ago, maybe like several weeks ago, we did an episode talking about Jeff Bezos's now infamous op-ed in the Washington Post, talking about how the paper was basically like undermining its own credibility and influence by being too, left leaning, and they needed a return to objectivity. And we talked about that in the context of that occurring, and then other kind of big tech leaders ahead of Google. I think even Mark Zuckerberg kind of like reaching out to Donald Trump. This is like pre-election too, almost trying to like mend the bridge a little bit. And, some people thought like, well, is this like a sign of kind of culture changing? I think the more cynical of us were thinking, well, I think it's just them, knowing who's going to be in charge here and trying not to make some enemies or whatever. So is this like a legitimate kind of culture shift that we're seeing in terms of the end of wokeness in Hollywood and movies? Or is this just like a realization that, hey, sending out messages and virtue signaling is great, but at the end of the day, we need to make some money. Is that what's going on? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest example this year was Inside Out 2, because there was a report about the behind the scenes machinations and how they wanted to put some messaging in there and wanted to kind of go woke in a sense. And there were other voices there saying, no, let's just keep it neutral. Let's just tell a sweet story. And the movie made $1 gazillion, I'm estimating, but only barely. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a real clear-cut example of a company that was really struggling for years now with lackluster films, and all of a sudden they kind of do what they do best, which is telling these sweet, life-affirming stories that didn't really lecture us, and it broke the bank. So I think it really depends to be. I think it remains to be seen. I think there are people within the industry who are true believers who may not want to follow this path. And then there are others who are more pragmatic and saying, listen, the writing's on the wall. We've got to go back to our prime directive, which is entertainment. So I don't know who the winner will be. I do think this wokeness is fading to a certain degree. And, but it could also take one more woke movie that's a big success, like a Barbie. And then they say, oh, we're back on again. Let's do what we've been doing for the last 10 years. So I'm not convinced, but I also see a marketplace where there are so many alternatives that if Hollywood doesn't kind of catch up, they'll be left behind. I mean, when I go to bed at night, I watch YouTube, and I watch like Tim Dillon's podcast or Film Threat,
sure,
or I'll watch cooking channels that are kind of apart from the mainstream. And, all these different independent creators are making these wonderful content. They're lean and mean. They don't have the big overheads that the studios do. And they're getting attention. They're drawing a crowd. They're making people fans. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is really unwoke or just apolitical. Comedians like Joe Rogan and Ryan Long, they're not culture warriors. They're not Republicans, but they'll kind of follow the funny wherever it leads them. And if it leads them in a way that Stephen Colbert won't touch, then they're going to get more eyeballs. And I think it's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So just a real Jim's talking, but he's muted, of course. Real quick tangent, and then I'll let Jim talk. But I referenced one of our past episodes talking about like a potential decoupling with China. And this was in reference to the idea that Hollywood was really trying to like kowtow to China and like alter their films so that it would do better in China, because China had like a burgeoning box office there, tons of money to be made in China. Mm-hmm. So I recently, pre-COVID, I actually was like charting it out. I had like a Excel spreadsheet. This is how nerdy I am. Excel spreadsheet about total box office revenue in the United States over, a period of time. And then China's annual box office revenue over a period of time. And as it got to like 2019, it was getting real close. I think like in the United States, it was like $11 billion. And in China, it got up to like $9 billion. So it was getting close. And at that trajectory, I thought there was going to be like a switch around 2020, 2021, something around that those lines, where China now represented the biggest box office. So then COVID happened. Everything dropped off of a cliff. After COVID, the United States rebounded mostly. I don't think it's ever achieved that 11 billion or anything, but it's probably back up to like 8 or 9. China, on the other hand, has stayed like way down. It's like 500 million. Like it hasn't rebounded at all. So I wonder if Hollywood, and the reason for that is because of like a whole bunch of different stuff. China's government was pouring money into it. They were subsidizing the entire industry. At some period of time, they cracked down on more foreign films so that they could have better, amounts of theaters for their domestically made films. Because of all of this, people went to more streaming in China or whatever, but like the box office has never recovered. And I wonder if that's also going to be helping out the kind of the American-made film industry, where we're trying to appeal to Western audiences instead of the collective Communist Party of China or something like that. Has that been on your radar at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I even I appear in a documentary on this subject about Hollywood and China and that connection. A couple of things happened that made the change. Obviously, you mentioned COVID and the pandemic, but also what China has been doing has been training their filmmakers. And I think there's been some influence by American filmmakers who they've hired to be mentors. So they basically can make American films. They can make movies that look like American movies as far as the special effects, the production design. So they can make homegrown product, which Chinese moviegoers are naturally more amenable to. So they don't have to reach out to imports to get stories that speak to them. They can say homegrown products. So I think that's had a major impact on that situation, to the point where I've kind of jokingly said, and although it's not much of a joke, that Hollywood sold to China, and look what happened next. The money isn't there anymore. So you've seen American films, they still enter the Chinese market. They still make money. They still make a good amount of money, but it's far, far less than ever before. And I don't think it's coming back. I don't think it's going to go back to the pre-2019 levels. So yeah, that's what's going on. It's a good thing all around. We don't want to censor our films for their marketplace. We don't want to avoid topics that might upset the Chinese marketplace. And we want to tell more stories that are more, if not pro-Western values, have them sort of baked into the DNA. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and those movies and TV shows with the message, as the Critical Drinker says in an echo sound effect on his channel. Again, it goes back to Trump. When Trump was elected in 2016, a lot of people in Hollywood thought, how could we have let this happen? The social media giants were the same way. Mark Zuckerberg was like, there's that famous video from Google where Google, employees were in an auditorium crying to each other. How did we let this happen? And Hollywood felt the same way. How could we have possibly let this happen? We, as the culture makers in Hollywood, we have an enormous amount of power, and we didn't use it the way we should have used it to advance the message. And so, the message, and that's why they did this for the last 4 years or last 8 years. They figured, look, if we can make little boys want to be Luke Skywalker and little girls want to be Moana, then we can also make them want to be feminists and anti-racists and allies of the LGBTQIA community. And so that's what they spent the last 8 years doing. And what they found out is that people don't like that people are not going to pay their inflation adjusted money to go get lectures on politics, mixed in with supposed entertainment. And they lost sight of what they're actually doing and how important they actually are and what they think is to the whole culture. I think it was Laura Ingraham who had a book many years ago, might have been 25 years ago now. I think the title was Shut Up and Sing. And I think America and this election has told Hollywood, shut up and act. And if they don't, they're all going to go bankrupt because, as you said, Christian, there's a lot of other places to get entertainment. I mean, I unplugged from cable 4 years ago. I, like you, watch a ton of YouTube. And guess what I don't watch? Political lectures from people that I don't respect. I watch things like cooking shows and do-it-yourself videos. And of course, all of the pop culture stuff, including your stuff on YouTube there, the Hollywood and Toto podcast. So Hollywood is going to have to get this stuff straightened out. You might notice that Bob Iger isn't talking about politics anymore. He's backing off because he realizes that he may only have about a year left to save that what was once the most popular and money-making studio in Hollywood history, and now it's kind of in shambles.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch. I think the real thing to look for in the coming weeks is that we're really in the middle of Oscar season. Now, the Oscars are still months away, but this is award season where all the films that are, that have that award sort of sensibility are hitting theaters. Now, along the way, you'll see many award shows. You'll see a lot of actors going on the bully pulpit, getting interviewed. And I really wonder with Trump's election And with the political situation the way it is now, will they lean into that aggressively, or will they just say, hey, we know Hollywood's taking a beating on many fronts. We can't really afford to chase away any more people or any more audience members. We've got to chill and just focus on the art. I can't predict that. I almost think it'll be too enticing for stars not to take the anti-Trump baton and wave it aloft. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think that's going to be fascinating too, as well.
Yeah, another thing that that I find interesting, and this isn't, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a recent trend, more so in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And that's just the decline in celebrity relevancy. And this, I think, is more anecdotal. Maybe there's some kind of hard facts or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm curious of your opinion on this, Christian. But it just feels like the era of like movie superstars isn't at least what it once was. The idea that like, oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger's in a new movie, gonna go see it. What's it about? I'm not sure. Gonna go see it. Compared to today, where I think the closest you can get to is like the cast of, the Avengers, or at least what was the cast of the Avengers. But even that, I think the big draw wasn't necessarily Robert Downey Jr., but the, Tony Stark or something. Like that's what was bringing people into the movies. I don't think that, and again, maybe there's some data that contradicts this. The idea that like a new Robert Downey Jr. movie was going to come out and everyone was going to see it. That wasn't Iron Man. I just don't think that's the case. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think the era of the movie star is mostly over. There are still movie stars, Brad Pitt, Denzel Washington. I'm not denying that per se. But what you're talking about, sort of the glamour, the prestige, the cachet, I'm going to go see a movie because Tom Hanks is in it. It's just not there anymore. I mean, Tom Hanks has had some really significant duds in recent years, including Here, which came out a few weeks ago, which did just disastrous box office numbers. Listen, I think there's a lot of things here. One is we see the stars everywhere. They're not special anymore. Back in the day, if you saw Jack Nicholson at the Oscars, it meant something because he wasn't popping up on Jay Leno's couch every 5 minutes, and he wasn't doing a ton of magazine spreads. But now we can follow the stars on, Instagram, on TikTok, wherever. We see them, they're overexposed. I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but it just isn't the same. It isn't as magical. And we know so much about them. I always bring up Nicholson because he was such a man of mystery, great actor, obviously huge talent, but we didn't know everything about him. We didn't know how he voted. We didn't know where he went to lunch. We didn't know what he shared on social media. It was just Jack. And I think that was really kind of magical in a way. And it just kind of made him sort of special. And I think that today's stars just lack that. I do think that stars getting aggressively activist and political has hurt them across the board, angering half the country. And even when they disagree with what I have to think, I don't care. But if they do so in a really clumsy, callous, mean-spirited way, it certainly lessens the bond that I have with a particular actor. So there's a lot of different reasons why the era of the movie star is over. But I think the second part of that conversation is the clout they have as political bellwethers. I mean,
oh yeah,
this whole year started with, okay, we need Taylor Swift to endorse Joe Biden. We need that desperately. He's older. We've got to get that cool quotient. She's the biggest star in the world. That's got to happen. And eventually it did. And of course it was for Kamala Harris. It wasn't for Biden. And nothing happened. Nothing changed. It didn't move the needle. The biggest star on the planet, bar none, couldn't really change enough hearts and minds. And there have been recent polling to suggest that audiences are just exhausted by political lectures from the stars, and that it often works against them, and that it just didn't do anything. And of course, what we saw was that a Joe Rogan endorsement meant much more because we have a real strong connection with him because he's not really political in nature. And so when he says something profound, like, I think Trump's the guy just based on the situation on the ground, it matters. So I think there is sort of a change in this whole celebrity activism network. But having said all that, I don't think they'll stop. I think they'll keep on going. And there are some stars who do good things. Mark Duplass, who is a name you may not know, but he's a very good actor, does a lot of stuff. He was in the league. He talks at length about his own mental health issues on Instagram. Sure. He's very honest and transparent, and he's positive and he's uplifting. I think he's doing a really good thing. So I don't discount that stars can make progress and change and make life better. But I think they often do it in a very clumsy, silly way, like Ben Stiller saying, I'm for Kamala Harris because she's a woman and she's black and I want to be black. And If you got to go Google what he said, it was just
Oh, God.
absurd and silly. And he's smarter than that. So I think that kind of bumbling just doesn't really.
I think he was in character as Zoolander during that, though. So
I'd like to think so, but I'm afraid he wasn't.
Linnea, I'm curious of your opinion on this, because I think like the younger generation, which I'll put you in, and I'm not specifically saying you, but just younger generation, they're more interested in, these people that are famous off of like YouTube and Instagram, TikTok, or something like that. And I think one of the things that appeals to people, and not just in the youngest audience, I'll put millennials in there too, is this appeal of like authenticity. When you hear like Joe Rogan, most famous podcaster out there, just like, doing a 3-hour show with like a friend of his, it's just seems authentic. They're just like shooting the S for 3 hours. And people like that compared to, what's his face? The Titanic guy. Why am I blanking on his name?
DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio, where it feels like his entire persona is like carefully crafted by a team of like PR experts or something.
Yeah.
So,
well, and
Go ahead.
Christian probably knows better than I do on how this stuff works, but the sense that I get is that, Hollywood is struggling very badly right now with wanting stars to become like those YouTube personalities where, they have this like really authentic reaction to things going on in the world and they're giving their real opinion. But at the same time, when you let these people off the leash, they pull what is her name? Rachel Zegler. And
Never go the full Zegler.
Yeah. And they say a bunch of stuff that's just so inane and stupid and harmful to the like the product that they're also trying to push by making these stars more active on social media and stuff, that they end up, the next time you see them in an interview, it's like they've been lobotomized because the studio had to come in and tell them like, okay, here's what you have to say. We cannot take the risk of you going off the cuff and being crazy. And so, the thing with the big stars on YouTube and stuff is these are people who have started at zero and built up a real rapport with their audience.
Right.
They started from that authentic point. They did not start in the Hollywood machine where they're being, instructed on how to conduct interviews, and they're in these very controlled environments. And just innately, you have a degree of separation between yourself and between those Hollywood people that you don't have necessarily with like YouTubers. And in fact, there's a little bit of a problem on YouTube and on, Instagram, social media in general, is that a lot of viewers develop like what's called like a parasocial relationship with the star, where they get a little bit too attached, maybe not, hopefully not too attached to the point of like a Reagan type situation.
No, there's like a joke. There's a joke where it's like, Red Letter Media came out with a new video. I get to spend another hour with my friends.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, but with Hollywood, they're just not going to be able to build that. And they've tried also taking people from YouTube and putting them into movies to try and get people to come watch the movie, because like Jacksepticeye is going to be in it or something. And it always just comes off as cringe, because now you're taking someone who's authentic,
exactly,
more or less, and then putting them into a, rigid corporate scripted environment. And so it just can't be the same.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, Jim, I mean, this kind of goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with Jeff Bezos in the Washington Post. And it's like this fear that, even with our full endorsement, the entire newspaper industry is going to be pushing for Kamala Harris, and then she loses. What does that say about our influence? And I think the same thing could be said about all of these celebrities, where it's their full-throated endorsement. I mean, you've got Beyonce and Taylor Swift and all of these people, the Avengers, all coming out to support Kamala Harris, and then she loses. What does that say about their influence?
It says they don't have the influence that they think they have. And I would actually argue that they've never really had the influence that they think they have. I don't think I think most people are pretty rational, and they don't, the last deciding factor, maybe I'll vote for Trump, maybe I'll vote for Kamala Harris. Oh, but the Avengers assembled in they weaponized cringe to come together and put out a promo video for Kamala Harris. I don't think a single voter in the United States went one way. Actually, they may have gone the other way toward Trump after seeing this video. Maybe you can play with the sound off. I think a lot of people have already seen it. Where they came out and support all of the Avengers. So I think they're starting to realize it now, Christian. I'm sure you would agree that coming out politically like this, and there was a time, there they are. Hey, Avengers, and all this, it's just ridiculous. It was so terrible. But, I think, old Hollywood, Hollywood was not always political. In fact, Hollywood used to be conservative. That was kind of if you had to say what Hollywood was in the 50s, basically before the new generation, basically the hippification of Hollywood, starting with movies like Easy Rider and stuff like that. Before that, Hollywood was very conservative. They knew that they wanted to appeal to the broad middle of America. And so they weren't going to do anything controversial, which we didn't start seeing until the 60s. But these celebrities, I think now might realize that not only is the juice not worth the squeeze when you come out in favor for one particular political candidate, but that too, nobody listens to you. You don't have any effect. And all you've actually managed to do, Christian, is diminish what made you special in the eyes of the most people in America, because, they are just human beings, and they don't live lives like you and me live, but they get to pretend to be somebody and portray something on the screen that has an emotional impact on us. That's the point of a movie or a television show, is to make an emotional impact on the audience. And they throw it all away with this sort of stuff. So we're probably going to see a lot less and less of this in the future, I would think. What do you think, Christian?
I don't know. I don't think it's going to go away for sure. I think what I find the most troubling about this whole celebrity activism is the lack of content and depth and real bona fide arguments. Because, when Ben Stiller or the white men for Harris campaign unfurls, they're not saying, Kamala Harris did this, this, and this, and when she's president, she'll do even more. They're not pointing to achievements. They're not pointing to positions. They're not pointing at policies. It just doesn't have any depth or substance. And you get this sort of pie in the sky verbiage, and you think, well, I go to the supermarket and everything's higher. And I go fill up my tank and everything's more expensive. And I go stop at a stop sign and there's 12 squeegee people coming to my car who are illegal immigrants from another country. And so, Scarlett Johansson, God bless her, she's not living that life and she's not seeing that. And when she tells me to vote for so-and-so, she's not giving me a real constructive reason why. It's just all smoke and mirrors. So I think that really hurts. Recently I've been focusing a lot on Zachary Levi, the Shazam star, who's gotten more pro-Trump, whatever you want to label him, certainly right of center, for lack of a better phrase. But listen to him speak. He's really thoughtful. He's not mean. He's actually very uplifting and empathetic. But when he talks about policies and politicians, he's got something to say. And you could disagree with it. I don't probably agree with everything he says, but it's got something to it. And I think we're just exhausted by politicians and celebrities who just have nothing to say. If Kamala Harris was going to change the world, she's in the office with her colleague there, President Biden. They could have done something. They haven't. We know that. And so I think that's why it really falls on deaf ears. And actually track back a couple of years to that cringeworthy Imagine video with Gal Gadot and friends when they were kind of cheering us up from their palatial estates. We're thinking, my God, you're trapped at home. I want to be trapped at home with you. Look at that house. It's amazing. I'd kill to spend 6 months there. It'd be paradise. But I'm in my 1-bedroom apartment. I'm struggling here. So it was an early sign that there's a real disconnect here, and it doesn't favor the stars.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're going to stop either. I think they'll keep doing it with no substance behind what they say. But I also think they're going to be saying it to a smaller and smaller echo chamber of people that already agree with them. And you actually had a recent episode of Hollywood and Toto that you said, hilarious, liberal celebrities flee Twitter for blue sky. So it's like, yeah, let's be less relevant by going to a platform that's only got a little circle of people that agree with us constantly. So it's like, that's just another sign of them just becoming increasingly irrelevant.
Yeah. Just a quick side note. I listened to a podcast this week. I believe it was Slate produced it. And I thought it was, well produced. The people on mic were polished and professional. They were talking about the Daily Wire and sort of right of center stories entering the marketplace. And it was so fascinating because, first of all, the smug was off the charts. I mean, there's no measurement device that could actually quantify it. But also, it was just so much proof that they're in this bubble, that they have no idea that half the country wants different kinds of stories, that half the country is maybe upset with this woke mindset. It was when, I mean, I think we should listen to it and study it and take notes on it because it was just so disconnected from the reality that many people have. So I mean, that's Hollywood as well.
Right. So this next topic, this one might come as a curveball to you. I did not warn you of the topics that we were going to talk about. I thought it was just more of a free-flowing conversation. But as the constant listeners of this show know, I am particularly interested in emerging issues, whether that's self-driving cars, automation, robots, and artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, again, for constant listeners, we've talked about how it's impacting and being incorporated into all sorts of industries. And one of those industries, surely, is Hollywood and movie making. So this can apply to a handful of different things. One, just like, using large language models for script writing, maybe like specifically, dialogue writing or just outlining stories or anything like that. But also generative AI could be used for like CGI effects and like really groundbreaking stuff when it comes to that. And this has kind of led people into almost two diverging kind of thought processes when it comes to artificial intelligence in movie making. One is that it's going to replace humans and that we're going to see more AI created scripts, AI generated actors, even CGI, people that are in the CGI business being removed because now, some artificial intelligence generative AI could do it at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time. It's going to like replace people in this process. The other camp thinks that it's like, no, these are just tools that kind of lower the bar for entry for people to be able to make wonderful things without needing a $12 million budget, $100 million budget. So this is actually going to help the creative process going forward. So I'm curious of what your thoughts are on this, Christian. Do you fear the use of AI in the movie making industry, or do you think that this could be a boon to creativity?
Well, I fear the T1000 most of all.
No doubt.
But I think it could be actually both what you said. I mean, I think that, yeah, it is a tool. It can be helpful. I think Hollywood studios are desperate to cut costs. So it feels inevitable that they'll lean on these tools at some point sooner than later, even though there's a lot of pressure within the industry not to engage with AI at all. Just ask Justine Bateman. So I think there's that. I think that it's impossible to stop. But, I see a lot of generic, boring, cookie cutter stories, TV shows, movies. And I have to say, I can't imagine that they couldn't be written by an AI bot. I mean, some of the dialogue is terrible in movies today. You really couldn't do that with a computer. And also a friend of mine just sent me a video. I was Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre having a meeting in a bar with Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., kind of like cool, irreverent rebels from one era meeting another. And it's fascinating to watch the Sinatra and Sammy Davis because it looks just like them, but you can tell it's fake. But I just think that the technology is growing so rapidly, maybe in 3 years, if not sooner, that's going to look pretty darn good. And I think then all of a sudden you'll have John Wayne movies again in theory. And so I don't know. This is a subject that honestly, maybe scare is too provocative a word, but it's really, I feel like it's almost impossible to really wrap my head around. And I don't know who can, but I do think it's going to be a game changer in significant ways.
Yeah, I think what we're all waiting for is an Expendables prequel where it has all of those action stars in their prime. But Linnea, as I was teeing up this topic, you said in the private chat that you've got some strong opinions on this issue. So I'm wondering if we're going to butt heads here or if we're going to be in agreement. So fire away.
No, I pretty much agree with what Christian said. I do think there need to be like guiding, like guide rails here on this issue. I I'm pretty opposed to using AI to do like deep fakes of deceased actors, especially if they hadn't approved of that. I don't think that even like their estate should get to say yes to something like that. It just seems gross. I don't have a good, well thought out, like philosophical argument as to why that would be bad. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies, and I think it's the wrong thing to do. As was already kind of said, it feels a lot like they've already been using robots or like the AI in order to write some of these scripts, because they are so, especially for the Marvel movies. I mean, those movies are just trash. I forget what article or what actor it is who said this recently, but he said that like the Marvel movies are not movies, like they're not films.
Oh, yeah, that was a director. I can't think of who it was.
Oh, okay.
Either.
Yeah, I can't. And he was just like disgusted by especially the direction that they've gone in. Cause I think most of us would agree, like Iron Man was a good movie. I thought that was a good movie for, as a movie and also as a superhero flick, but the most recent ones are just terrible.
Martin Scorsese said it. It was Martin Scorsese said that it's not cinema. Marvel is not cinema. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, it kind of feels like a big corporate board for Disney or something already is kind of a large language model, it seems, because everything goes through these layers and layers of filters, and there isn't very much creativity that's getting popped out the other end. I see mentioning in the private chat that like Craven movie that just came out, I didn't even know it was coming out. I
thought that came out
when I was
ago.
a kid. I was such a big fan of like Spider-Man stuff. I would have been so excited, but you take one look at like even the tiniest clip from this movie and you're just thinking, just pass. This thing was written by a computer for sure. I would say, yes, for infilling and animation, they already do that to a certain point with a lot of the digital animation. But the thing that I think is the most interesting, the most exciting about the artificial intelligence when it comes to effects and to the like voice work that can be done with it is for fan content and lowering the barrier of entry for a lot of people who would love to be able to make their own animated films, or even like, CGI type animated films, especially. And they just can't, because they can't afford the programs and stuff that you would normally need to get into it. They can't afford to go to school. They can't afford to spend all of their time hand animating every speck of it. And while that's a worthy thing that I wish would come back, I wish that the big studios that have the money to be able to be paying animators to do real animation, like real hand-drawn animation, I wish they would be doing that. But I don't think it's a bad thing at all for somebody who is outside of the industry to be able to have a lower barrier to entry so that they can make their own content. And I know that, the big studios hate that. Some of it is fair enough, copyright infringement when people are making fan content. I would quibble with some of that. There's some really good stuff that's come out for Star Trek and for Warhammer and all sorts of stuff that was made by fans on YouTube that got crushed by the studios for no good reason. I think that there's a lot of opportunity on that end. I'm a little bit more hesitant about Hollywood itself using it. One, because I think they're going to do it for evil, basically. And two, because they already, they have the budgets to do this insane, like cool, time-consuming stuff. So why don't they do it? Yeah,
Christian, I think that this is actually I think this is actually going to drive a wedge. This might actually increase the downward slide of Hollywood because there was another issue that we had talked about on the show when there was like that longshoreman strike that was going on, and one of their conditions, we're going to shut down the ports of the United States unless contracts are signed that basically like prohibit automation in our field here. And it was to protect jobs in that industry, right? So that there's more dues paying members and that sort of thing. And I kind of wonder if Hollywood is going to do the same thing, that there's going to have, that same group of Avengers are going to come on the screen to talk about how we have to make sure that AI isn't taking our jobs in Hollywood. And I think they'll probably succeed, at least to some degree in Hollywood. However, as you mentioned, and has been mentioned by pretty much everyone on the show, because there's a lot more avenues in terms of content creation. And I think in previous, years when we've been talking, we've brought up even like independent film production houses. I think Daily Wire is still getting more and more involved in making their own movies. And I can't imagine that they would have the same sort of limitations on using AI. So if you've got one side, the Hollywood establishment, that's not trying to use it, but all their competitors are using it to make movies that rival the Hollywood movies in terms of the visual effects and all of that, that might actually kind of level the playing field a little bit. We might see Hollywood further decline and these independent studios blossom even further. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing that already to a degree. I mean, I mentioned how, actually Jim and I, we watch a lot of YouTube, and those are independently created platforms with budgets that are a fraction of what Hollywood does. So if you keep giving independent creators more tools, more efficiency, more ability to create art in a way that can rival the studios or rival, local networks, yeah, it's gonna make more competition. It's gonna make more art, and again, it'll be what's the best, what's entertaining. It's one thing to have a YouTube channel, but you've got to draw eyeballs and be engrossing and be interesting. So yeah, I don't see it. I don't think you can fight back against it. Listen, I have a lot of sympathy for actors who fear, like voice actors losing work based on AI voice. I get that. There's a new movie on Netflix. They just added to Netflix called, I think it's Subservience with Megan Fox. And it's about a family that gets an AI robot, looks like Megan Fox, but it does deal with themes like, well, what if the guys who works at a building construction firm, what if they just hire a bunch of robots and they lower the cost? They don't want to lose their work, but how do you stop that progress? So yeah, it's truly uncharted territory. And for every Hollywood studio who understandably fights back, there's going to be some little guy or gal who's going to say, I'll use that and I'll make a story. And if it's good, I'm going to get a lot of eyeballs and I'm going to make some money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Look, I mean, if AI animation gets good enough to legitimately compete with human-made animation from start to finish, then the audience will respond with their attention and their money. I mean, we're not there now, but maybe we will be. If somebody wants to do their own version of The Hobbit and put it on YouTube, with an AI animation, I would check it out. And if I like it, maybe, will I like it better than even the Rankin Bass version of that way back in the 70s? Probably not. Will I like it as well as, Peter Jackson's absolute classic, one of the greatest movies of the last 50 years, the trilogy of The Lord of the Rings? No chance, I would think, of that. But, just like, self-driving cars are coming one way or another. I mean, that's just the fact. And so that's going to put a lot of cabbies out of business, just like Uber put a lot of cab companies out of business. I mean, you're not going to be able to stop the advance of technology. It's just a matter of how and when it's used. I mean, even technology changing the way Hollywood has to think about its business model goes back a very long time. I mean, just in our lifetimes, Christian, as we're, I'd say, yeah, we're definitely middle-aged. But, the idea of home video was not something anybody conceived of in the 1970s. But by the 80s, it was ubiquitous. And so Hollywood had to adjust to that new reality of the way people, consume movies. And the same thing with television. When it debuted, the movie studios thought that we were in big trouble because television, they don't have to go out anymore. They can just watch it on a little screen. Yeah. But as the industry has always found out, the market actually does win. And it's because the market is chosen by the people. And so if, again, AI will end up probably being more of a tool, you're still going to need a lot of human input, at least for the next, I would think, at least 10 or 20 years of AI animation advancement. You're going to need people there who know what they're doing with that tool. It's not as if, the T-1000 is making propaganda films by using AI. They're still going to take human input.
Not
yet. And what I think you're going to see as far as like AI voice cloning is it's getting better almost weekly at this point. It's amazing right now. I heard something the other day, Christopher Lee, the great Christopher Lee, who was Saruman in Lord of the Rings, and of course was in all sorts of movies for 60 years. Here's a guy who fought Nazi. He hunted Nazis. He actually met Tolkien. He met the assassins of Rasputin. I mean, what a life this guy led. But I heard they had some outcuts from some voiceover work he did in The Hobbit. And there's controversy over whether or not they should be able to use that in another Tolkien project, even though he didn't record those words for that very thing. I guess you could take that up with the Christopher Lee estate. But what you're going to see Hollywood actors do is they're going to license their voice and the likeness of their voice and their face likenesses.
Oh yeah,
to make sure that they're talk about creating generational wealth. You know, my great grandchildren will be collecting royalties because they're still putting, you know, me in movies, whether you're Chris Evans or Harrison Ford or somebody else. So that's where technology is going. You can't stop it. You just have to learn to adjust.
Well, that
Donald,
Jim, and they don't even. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. A quick one for Donald. I feel like there was some effort made with James Earl Jones in his later years where they're trying to capture his voice for future work and Darth Vader stuff. Is that true? I'm sorry to speak over you.
Oh, no. I think they did do that. And they had like basically a data bank where they could just like have Darth Vader with James Earl Jones' voice say whatever they want. And it's like, and I think that's like in perpetuity. Like, I think they could use that forever. I could be mistaken on that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. Linnea, did you have some final thoughts on this?
Well, and all I was going to add is they don't even have to do any of that. With even right now, with the way that the AI animation is, you can create a whole character that's not even just stealing from an actor's likeness. You can create already very compelling, you know, facsimiles of a real human being that's just a totally made up, fabricated character, and then you don't have to pay any actors anything.
Right. So, yeah. You know, I was wondering about that. I was like driving into work one day, and on the radio, there was some like random radio commercial. And I was like, is that Steve Carell's voice? And after like a few minutes, it was like, or seconds, I was like, no, that's not him. But then it made me think, like, why don't studios or businesses just use like this technology to make like a Steve Carell voice to promote their thing, but just make it slightly off, you know, so you don't have to pay, you know, Tom Hanks $1 million to read an ad for shampoo. You could just have fake Tom Hanks do it for like 15 cents. But all right, so we're already at about an hour here, so we're gonna make this last section pretty quick, but we have to, of course, go through the best and worst movies of 2024. So we'll save the worst for last, and we'll start with the best. So Christian, what are the best movies that you watched this year?
I've got a cheat sheet here, so forgive me. But my favorite movie this year was A Complete Unknown. Comes out December 25th. That's the Bob Dylan biopic with Timothée Chalamet. Nice. And I haven't really been sold on him as an actor completely, but this won me over. He's terrific in the movie. Great music. Obviously, it's Chalamet actually singing Dylan's songs. But it really just felt like a restless spirit who we will never truly know what makes him tick. And they lean into that in the movie. It's wonderful. The recreations of the 60s are just pinpoint perfect. And just loved it. I really enjoyed The Brutalist, which is brutally long. It's 3.5 hours. It's a story about a Hungarian Jew who escapes the Nazis and comes to America to create a career for himself as an architect. Adrian Brody is spectacular in the movie. I think he might be the favorite for Best Actor. He's already won one. And it's just a wonderful epic film. It really does kind of has a sweeping to it that I liked.
Is that a sequel to The Pianist?
No.
That's what it made me think of when you were describing it.
It's part of the shared universe, yes.
Yes.
I really enjoyed Am I Racist? I thought it was a smart, very funny documentary from the Daily Wire. It made you think. It certainly ridiculed DEI proponents in ways that were just ruthless. And I thought it kind of checked all the boxes you want from a provocative, side-splitting comedy / documentary. So that's one of my favorite films. I thought Wicked was just excellent. I'm not a movie musical person. I've seen the production once. I thought it was quite good. I just thought the musical update just did everything you wanted to do. Great songs, big booming voices, lovely production design. I thought as quirky and cringy as Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo were on the press tour, they're great on screen together. And I thought it did everything you wanted to do in a movie like that. And then also A Real Pain, you know, it's not a great movie, but it's a really enjoyable film about two Jewish cousins take a trip to Poland to kind of discover their roots, find where their late grandmother lived. And they're two very different personalities. Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin are the stars there. It's just very unique, fresh, original, enjoyable, well directed by Eisenberg. So I think that one's among the better films this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy to hear you report on the Bob Dylan one, because I was kind of interested in it, but I've only seen the trailer once. The trailer itself looked pretty good, but I feel like those kind of biopic movies are very hit or miss. Some of the
Yep.
ones that are trying to be like this bigger thing, and it ends up just being like hollow and terrible. So I'm glad that you're putting that on your nice list, but I'm curious about your naughty list. So let's hear what the worst movies of 2024 were.
The worst of the worst was Jackpot, one of the most painful comedies I've ever seen. Aquafina and John Cena, two performers with talent. The concept, a dystopian future where a lottery winner has to fight for her survival in order to cash in on her checks. It is abysmal. And it's from the director of Bridesmaids, Paul Feig, I think his name is.
Feig, yeah.
Feig? I always get his name wrong. He's a talented guy. He has lost his mojo.
Yeah,
his
Lady Ghostbusters director.
Just off. I thought Blink Twice was a terrible Me Too style movie. Good start, interesting premise about women being taken to this island, which they think they'll have a great time with this Channing Tatum fellow, and then things go south from there. Just awful and painful and predictable and cringy and brimming with messages. Madam Web, for all the obvious reasons. I mean, people were making fun of Madam Web before it hit theaters. The early trailer made people laugh out loud. The movie made me laugh out loud. I think you need to watch it with a completely different mindset. You don't expect a good film or a competent film. You expect a comedy of sorts, and it might have a fun second life. So I can't deny that.
Should you be three beers in before you hit play on that one?
That's a minimum. If your doctor has to prescribe those alcoholic beverages, you get her done. So I completely agree. And I left out Kraven the Hunter. It's bad and it's cringeworthy and it's funny. I may update my worst of list to kind of put that as a PS kind of a thing. And Drive-Away Dolls. Ethan Coen, part of the great Coen brothers duo. Indescribably bad, cringy, a lot of progressive messaging here, but on the nose, blunt. Attacks on GOP politicians come out of nowhere. Just a romance that doesn't make a lick of sense. No big laughs. Tons of real aggressive nudity and sex. I'm not offended by that, but it just was coarse and unnecessary.
Right.
I just remember watching and thinking, I can't wait till I compile my worst of list because I've got to put that on there. And there it is. So it's there and it deserves it. And also, I think a lot of people disagree with me strongly here, but listen, Sydney Sweeney is adorable. I think Glenn Powell is a Tom Cruise-esque figure at this point. I hated Anyone But You. It's a rom-com, two beautiful people. It's just one of these comedies where it's farcical situation atop farcical situation. Nothing registers as real or natural or authentic. It's a disaster to me, but it made a lot of money. People liked it. God bless them. I just hated it.
Great. Well, so movies to look for and movies to stay away from. But I haven't asked you this in previous episodes, but I will this time. Are there anything that's coming out in 2025 that you are particularly can't wait for it to come out?
My mind often goes blank with that question. I will pick one movie that just jumped out just because of the trailer, which was just released. It's called 28 Years Later.
Oh, yes.
Of course, it's Danny Boyle's zombie film. The trailer is an absolute work of art. I can't even duly describe it. You have to witness it. There's a narration going on. I think they plucked it, I'm going to guess, from some other source, and they added it to the sequence of events. It's chilling. Now, Danny Boyle's a great director. 28 Days Later is a wonderful zombie film. It kind of revived the genre in a way. I can't wait for this movie. I think it's going to be just amazing. But the rest of the year is all reboots and remakes and sequels and things like that. So another Fantastic Four. I guess we'll see the end of Wicked. I think it's called Wicked the Good or something. It's some clumsy new title. So, we'll have to wait and see. Captain America, Brave New World has been delayed and reshot. It sounds like a disaster. We'll have to see if that can kind of revive the MCU brand. But yeah, I'm looking forward to new original movies, and they're in short supply.
Yeah, I love movie trailers. I know there's bad movie trailers, there's good movie trailers, and then there is like artwork. And that one, when I watched it, the 28 Years Later, I was just like, this is amazing. I'm going to share it with everybody.
I mean, the movie can't compete. I got to say, it just can't.
Yeah, no, there is. I have a folder on YouTube just for movie trailers, and many of them are for movies that I didn't even like the movie. I just like the trailer a lot, and I want to remember just for the trailer. But I figured you were going to say Avatar 3. That's clearly the movie that everyone is waiting for in 2025. Jim's laughing, but we know it's going to make $1.5 billion at the very least.
And nobody will ever talk about it again. That's the thing.
That's so true. It's so true. It's going to make all the money and no one cares.
No one cares. Nobody talks about it.
Except for me and producer Andy. We're going to be the only two that care about the Avatar franchise, but whatever. I see you in the background cheering. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to jump in with something. And we talked just about movies, and I know, Christian, that you cover a lot of pop culture, and I actually watch more series than I do films. I think I went to the movies twice in 2024. I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and I think I saw one other film. Oh yes, I saw Godzilla -1. Although that might have been in 2023. I forget. But I'm watching, like a lot of people are watching what they have. They have streaming services at home. I think the best, pop culture product out of Hollywood this year, and maybe it wasn't fully out of Hollywood, actually. It was Shogun, which on Hulu, which I think was just outstanding. It swept a bunch of awards already. It was really a revelation. It was really, really great. But in that vein, Christian, I wonder if you could, what are some of the things that you saw this year, either they be a film or a miniseries or a TV series, that people can get on streaming, but maybe didn't get a lot of publicity, a lot of buzz, but that you would definitely make a strong recommend?
I think this one got a little bit of hubbub around it. It was immediately picked up for a second season. I just thought it was everything that rom-coms should be, but often aren't. It was Nobody Wants This. It's a story about a rabbi who falls in love with a shiksa, a non-Jewish lady, played by Kristen Bell. It's 10 episodes. It's sweet. It's funny. It's laugh out loud funny, which I find is pretty rare these days. And let me tell you, I'll give you a mild spoiler. The first kiss between the two main characters, I'll tell you, if you're anything of a romantic, it'll buckle your knees. It's a wonderful moment, and good on these two actors, Adrian Brody, I believe. No, Adam Brody, I believe, and Kristen Bell. Just wonderful performances. You could see where this could sustain a series because they're so different. They come from two different worlds. But I'm looking for more. But half hour each episode, breezy, fun, smart. Why can't they make more rom-coms like this with heart and soul? I really loved it. So I definitely checked it out.
Because Hollywood doesn't have a heart or a soul anymore. That's why.
You said it. I didn't, but I thought
it. Great. Well, last comments. Anything else? Any stories, anecdotes? Anything anyone wants to get off their chest before we wrap it up?
Lot. I'm like the worst guest for this today or this year because I did not watch very many new movies at all, and I barely watched any new TV. I watched like Columbo reruns this year.
Oh, reruns! I thought there was a reboot that I didn't hear.
No,
of.
I wish. No,
they gender swapped it. And
no, I'm just sitting here dreading when more things that I like get remade in the next couple of years.
I don't know. Columbo starring Melissa McCarthy might work for me.
Gosh, Jim. Get on.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the In the Tank podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining in for this episode. Join us every week for a new episode. If you'd like, you can support the show, not by using super chats because YouTube has demonetized us, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank. Donate that way. That way YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. You can help out the show not by spending $1, but by just spending a couple of seconds if you'd like to do it that way, by liking this video, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, just leaving a comment under the video all helps break through those big tech algorithms to prevent content like this from being shown to more people. You could follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. Send us your comments, questions, and suggestions of the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Christian Toto, I know you've got hollywoodandtoto.com. I know you've got your podcast. What else do you have to pitch? You're pretty much on everything. I've seen you as a guest on a whole bunch of different shows, but where can people go to kind of stay up to date with all of your work?
Well, I mean, the weekly podcast is what I'm really focusing on now. It's on YouTube, Rumble, and of course, iTunes and most audio platforms. And I also contribute to The Blaze and The Daily Wire.
Fantastic. Nice. The Blaze. Good job. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Linnea, same question.
Oh, yep. I am also on X at Linnea Lueken. You can also come check us out on our own podcast that we have on Fridays, which is the Climate Realism Show, which is streamed on YouTube and also on X. So come check us out.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a happy new year, and we will talk to you next year.
Bye-bye.
I think she's an idiot.